Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 258, Fraternalism and the Church. 143 pages long, relatively lengthy, therefore this work took so long to get published, and I'll get into that little story at the end about one of my bitches about Amazon KDP, I suppose. Link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links are to my books, blogs. I do have some Masonic materials and materials about fraternalism, sort of these gentlemen's societies. A lot of them late 1800s, early 1900s especially, some historical documents. This is a pretty good work. It goes a little bit more into the charitable form and function of various lodges, including some of the secular movements, not necessarily just the religious ones. But it also talks about sort of the mystic nature of Jesus, the Essene Jesus. It touches on occultism. It does touch on Catholicism, its particular forms and dogma with regards to these groups at the time. You'll remember that the Catholic Church fought bitterly against all of these various lodge orders, including the Christian ones, for a very long time. Finally sort of making peace with it in the late pre-modern period. We're talking within the last half century, basically. Even now, a little bit of animus at times, a little bit less so. They've decided to focus more on people who wear fedoras or worship Odin, I think, at this point. Anyway, this is an excellent work, and it was very, very difficult to get it published because in the initial source work, the author was listed as a devotee to both. That is, both to the Catholic Church specifically and to the fraternal orders. The publisher was the Ed Maximilian Company or something like that. Now, the author listed is what you're supposed to put on the KDP document, so I put it as a devotee to both, all in last name. And it kept rejecting me. And I tried every permutation of these words within the author's fixture, and they kept telling me, well, the author's name and title don't match the interior. So I thought it was a problem with the PDF that you use for the interior and the PDF that you use for the cover. And I looked over them. I looked at them 20 different fucking times. I'm like, is my spacing wrong? Is their algorithm glitched? What the hell am I doing wrong? Finally, I managed to get an email that talked about the metadata to being faulty because of the initial work being different. I say, of course, they're asking for the publisher's information instead of the actual listed author on the document itself. They never told me that. So for 2 weeks, I struggled through that, constantly re-upping the files in slightly different forms with slightly different metadata, hoping that they would okay it. They never bothered to tell me specifically what was wrong, so ball definitely dropped there. I'd probably be on 260 by now if that hadn't happened. I am, by the way, almost completely done with the second herbal. I'm actually waiting because there was one illustration missing, actually, in the documents that I received, so I gotta wait on that. I'm hoping it comes within the next day or two. This is a really good work, though, altogether. The last sections are the most interesting. From an occult perspective, the concept of mystic Jesus, of Jesus' commands conform to the basic precepts of charitable lodges. They don't compete with the church. They're doing exactly what the church says is supposed to do, take care of the orphans and widows and shit, try to spread peace and prosperity. That part is definitely the most interesting, but it's also interesting because it talks about some of these lodges and asks them a series of questions like membership, the basic precepts and rules of the order. Insurance is actually covered as well, because a lot of these lodges and fraternal groups really were a lot like the guilds of the past, and basically were stand-ins for the same, and so groups of people would collectivize for insurance purposes. There was, at the time, it was funny, there was a cultural movement involved with coal barons actually driving the prices up, and so these groups would attempt to negotiate the prices down and step in order to make sure that the widows weren't freezing to death, so to speak. Very interesting historical work, therefore, as well, but mostly notable for its treatment of the occult topic of Jesus, the occult topic of charity in that sense, and a little bit of the history of sort of these lodge movements. Again, it goes well beyond just the Freemason stuff. Very hard-fought work. One that I enjoyed editing. It's the kind of work I enjoy reading for its historical content anyway, but Amazon KDP really just gave me a fucking hassle with it. So again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links are to my books, blogs. Most of the other works that are comparable and on comparable subjects, if they're not under the academic header because they're more historical, they'd be under the scriptures and spirituality header, actually, because they're technically religious works. I've also got works of Kabbalah, some Hindu materials there as well, specifically because they're more actual scripture, the Kabbalion as well. That's about all. Peace out.